Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, Peter, Pat Buchanan has written a typical, interesting, and provocative column. His starting point was the recent census report, which pointed out that the white or the European population of the United States has declined in relative terms, but more seriously in absolute terms as well. In other words, the number of white people or European origin Americans is declining every year. In other words, deaths outnumber births. And so he cited some numbers, and he's saying here that between 2010 and 2021, the white American population declined in real and relative terms, and from 63% to under 58%. And then he said Black Americans held roughly at 12%, no change. Hispanics went up from 9% to almost 19%. And so and then from 1990 to 2020, which is 30 years, the white percentage of the population has gone from 3/4 of the US population to less than 3/5. And that's just 1990. So if you go back to, say, the Kennedy-Eisenhower era, when it was 90% of the population, I mean, you are talking going from 90 to 58%, really in just one lifetime. I mean, that's not 1960 is just 60 years ago, so it's not that long ago. That is a staggering numbers, and they obviously have political and policy implications. And Buchanan then talked about, well, it's a celebration of diversity, and the response of many pundits was, goody, great, let's end white minority rule, once and for all in the United States. They just don't have the numbers anymore. But I think it is interesting. I mean, America is changing very drastically. America is not able to rally around the things that it once was able to rally around. I mean, basically, you had the flag, you had the Constitution, you had the Founding Fathers, the Bill of Rights, and all of the rest, and all the heroes of the United States, the people who conquered the West, the big industrial capital, and all the people create the railroads and everything that the stuff that was created was part of the Hollywood folklore, the westerns and so on. You now have a very substantial portion of the population that just doesn't like any of that. They just hate it all. It's nothing to do, it's without me, it's nothing to do with that. And so Buchanan's point was that this is going to have enormous impact if America wants to be the dominant power in the world, because the Chinese don't think like that. The Chinese are very much into unity. They want unity. They're afraid of diversity. They're afraid that the country could disintegrate. The same with the Japanese as well. They think we are one nation. We are one people.
Also, you can put Russia into that category, though.
Exactly. That's right. And I think that's it. I mean, he talked a little bit about the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union, and I think this was a point that Putin made in his recent article, that for some bizarre reason, the Bolsheviks wanted to foster diversity. It's not entirely clear why they did that.
Because they hated Russian culture.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that was that they hated this, greater Russian chauvinism, and they wanted to create so much diversity. But by doing so, they, in a way, were, digging their own grave. Yeah. And again, it unraveled eventually once the communist rule collapsed. So it's a really interesting question. Where do we go with diversity? How can you go on being a great power when there's some fundamental disagreements on the most basic issues within the country?
One of the interesting things, I've lived in many places in the world, and only in America is everything hyphenated. Everything hyphenated. Right. And that is always showing difference. And so, you never hear the word unity anymore. Okay, everything is about diversity, but my stress is unity, and it's around history, symbols, cultural lores, in the midst of, and all cultures, all great cultures have myths about themselves. Okay, and that's not a bad thing because that can be inclusive. You know, and the way, you know, I'll answer this, you know, with my own personal experience is that I live in Moscow. During the day, it's about a city of about 12 million people. I'm sorry. Yes, 12 million, 16 million during the day, 12 million at night, because a lot of people come to the city to work. Okay. The amount of, I mean, to use American parlance, the amount of diversity is extraordinary, but you don't look at someone and categorize them. Okay. I mean, someone that lives in Dagestan is Russian, but their ethnicity is Dagestani. But you say, are you Russian? Yes, I'm Russian. Okay, but no one hyphenates that. Okay, and there's a principle. It's called Ruski Mir, the Russian world. And what it is that it's very simple. Is that there's a dominant culture, and if you respect and honor that dominant culture, my smaller groups, we will protect you. We will protect your rights, okay? But you have to respect the dominant culture. You have to respect the dominant language. And for more and more so, as the West is completely secularizing itself, in this part of the world, people are returning to religion, having heightened religiosity, and essentially is that there's a respect for the Orthodox Church. And even non-believers have respect for the church because it is an important part of Russian culture. Okay, and of course there are people who say, well, maybe the church has too much control and all that, and you do have that debate, you know, too much influence. But most people say, but it's a good thing. It's because it's part of the fabric of our civilization. Because Russia is not really a nation state; it's a civilization, and this is one of the things it's had to deal with the rise of nationalism around the world, particularly its origins in Western Europe. But Russia is more of a civilizational experience. So is China.
Right. No, I think that's right. I think it is a civilization, and it's you know, language, literature, culture, history, and you know, something, you know, some unifying symbol around which everyone can rally around. Now, and I think that's why the story of World War II has become so central to the Russian identity, because it is something that unites everybody, and in this great pride of being Russian. That this is that they rose to the occasion. So there was almost the greatest existential challenge. You know, there was just a mass genocide was prepared for them. They rose to the challenge and defeated an enemy. And I think that it's very important that the government tries to unify. I mean, that's the point of they want a nation that identifies with a set of symbols. Now, that isn't happening in the United States, and I think that is a very serious issue because you know, you're right to point out. You know, of course, we can talk about the demographics, but that in itself wouldn't be determinative without a culture that fosters division and diversity. And essentially, Americans are being taught to be ashamed of themselves and ashamed of their past. And that is a disastrous thing, because every nation has many things in their past that, you know, that are shameful. But you know, that's history. I mean, you know, people don't just spring up from the soil spouting forth the ideas of John Stuart Mill and Thomas Jefferson. I mean, you know, people are what they are. You know, it takes a long time for civilizations to develop. So everyone has shameful things in the past, but you have to live with it. But just making Americans ashamed of themselves, that seems a very destructive activity. But that's what America is now engaged upon.
But of all times to go through this experience, George,
right,
when truly international competition and excellence, I mean, it really is good. I mean, if we can distill it down, I mean, it's going to be technical expertise and mastery of science. This is what's good. This is the revolution we're in right now. Okay, and now we go to some school board in Oregon and said, you don't even have to be able to read to graduate. I mean, the world is going in completely the opposite direction.
I think it's right. And they've abolished, I mean, they've abolished those standardized tests. I mean, it was there's been a steady drumbeat that's gone on decade after decade against the standardized tests. The argument was, well, the minorities, basically the African-American minority, continue to do poorly no matter how many times they rejig the format of the standardized test. They continue to do poorly. So they decided, well, we don't want this. We got this inequality of results. So let's just scrap the test. We're not going to have this anymore.
and on top of it, let's not have any advanced placement. Okay, let's punish the smart kids.
Right. That's it. Well, that's what happens. And what happens when you punish that is that, if you get the elite schools, in the elite schools, you have all of the rich people, the alumni, the friends of the people who are already at Harvard, say, the professors and their friends, they get their places. Then you get the minorities set aside, so 10% is set aside for the African American, whatever, 10% for Hispanic. But the great middle class, they don't get a look in. There's no room in Harvard for you, I'm afraid. So however smart you are, you're automatically shunted off to the second and third rank schools. So it's really what's happening is, again, that America is no longer a land of opportunity. I mean, the opportunities are being stifled.
Well, and also, I mean, what is the message that's being sent? That is that if you're a person of color, you don't have to achieve to be a success. I mean, what kind of message is that?
Right. No, exactly. Yeah.
It's condescending. It's again another white man's burden. Is that personally, it's for me, it's very simple. Is that when we had the Great Society come in, it destroyed the Black family, and then it started destroying the white families. Okay. Right. And another, like Hispanics, for example, from my personal experience, a lot more cohesion there. Asian families too, a lot more cohesion. Right. But when you don't have a father around, this is what happens. Okay, I mean, these are, for me, it's fundamental, it's principled, and it's easy to identify. Okay, right. Because like foreign policy, stop helping people, let them get by themselves.
That's right. But that was the thing. I mean, what happened, with the whole George Floyd thing, the reality that this was an arrest that ended in disaster, because the person who was supposedly under arrest refused to be arrested, and there was an almighty fight which ended disastrously. Anytime you resist the police, there's always a real possibility that it's going to end in disaster. And this became a kind of a national orgy of self-flagellation, in which Americans were somehow being, taught to be ashamed of themselves. They're taught that they're all racist. They're all enjoying some white privilege. Again, poor working class whites are enjoying privilege. That comes as news to them. But fundamentally, it is very, very destructive. So we talk about foreign policy. What we're going to be doing? America's going to be doing this. America's doing that. But you've got a complete, absolute fiasco in your own country, and the most fundamental, because you're stifling opportunities for ordinary people, and you're really leading to a kind of a destruction and demoralization within the country, and the relative and absolute decline in numbers. That's a serious thing. So it's not just simply you're relative to other people, you've gone into decline. Your absolute terms, deaths outnumber births. That means something very serious is going wrong.
And these people that are in power now, and we can go through, Hollywood, academia, the media, a woke corporate world, and then we have, obviously, in politics, we have the Democrats in power here. I mean, they're all supporting an ideology that determines winners and losers. This is something fundamentally new and very, very dangerous. Is that it's predetermined who the losers will be, okay?
right.
Well, who wants to be? How is that inclusive? And why would you want to be part of it? If you, I'm already by birth, at my birth, I'm excluded.
Right.
I mean, why would anyone want to participate in that?
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And do you remember that Kristen Gillibrand, who was running for president, and when she went to Youngstown, Ohio, and very poor people, and some white person said to her, you know, how am I privileged? You know, just because I'm white, you know, what kind of privileges do I have? And she then proceeded to lecture this poor person, poor, economically poor, why this person is privileged. I mean, can you imagine the what goes on in the mind of a politician actually seeking votes, who tells a voter, you know, who doesn't have enough money to basically get through to the end of the week, telling that voter, well, you are a privileged person.
Yeah. I mean, but see, this is one of my favorite terms. This is ideological possession. People are possessed by this ideology. The reality that they perceive, they negate it because it doesn't connect with their ideology, and they'll say, I mean, that's an astounding thing, because here she's looking at lower middle class people. Apparently, I saw the video myself, a lot of white people there, and you're chastising them. You know, you're privileged, though you're poor, okay? I mean, how do you figure that one out, George?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. So they say, you know, hey, because I've got white skin, I'm privileged. I have difficulties every month paying the rent, and I'm privileged. And as I say, you know, she's just driven by this ideology. Yes, of course, you know, if you're white, you know, you're privileged, and that's it. And if you're black, you're not. So the Obamas are an oppressed minority. You know, as Michelle Obama says, you know, to her daughters, be very, very careful when you go out of the house. You know, all terrible things are going to happen to you. So yeah, that's what an ideology is. You're blinded to the facts, and you just, you know, you're driven by the ideology.
Yeah, and her daughters are protected by the Secret Service, so I'm not really sure what they have to be worried about here.
Yes.
No, this self-hatred is so destructive, because I don't see why anyone, because if you accuse a poor white person of being privileged and racist, why do you want to partake into it? And then you have a minority people say, well, I'm oppressed and I'm owed something from you. I mean, that's just the seeds of destruction, where everything falls apart. We started our conversation about what brings people together. There's nothing that brings anyone together anymore, okay? You need that. You desperately need that. I mean, maybe a small country, we can discuss it. For a great country, you need that kind of format to be successful. And we've known this. I mean, you know, there's so many times, you know, being a history wonk and all that. And then it was the Italian nationalists said, now that we've made Italy, now we have to make Italians. Okay.
Right. That's yeah. Well, it's not, exactly. No one is. Go finish your point.
No, but see, you have to give people for reasons that come in. You gave the list of in the beginning, your introduction here. I would have thrown in one of the great achievements of the United States and the West in general, and people don't even give it a second thought anymore, was the middle class. I mean, you look at the early, you know, in the 17th century, there was no middle class. There were artisans, okay, and there was the petty bourgeois and things like that. But it was really in the 19th century that, you know, oh my goodness, we have the largest group of people, you know, and they have a vested interest in seeing their country and their culture succeed. Yes. And this is what happened in the West. We created a middle class that had cohesion. Look at the American middle class now. Let's go up to like 2000, okay? Because I need to look closer at the census. But what is the American middle class? Immigrants from Poland, Italy, Jews from Eastern Europe, and the Irish. That is the four pillars of our middle class. Right. Nobody celebrates that. Nobody.
Right. No, that's right, and that's why I don't know. I saw a clip. He's one of those Jimmy Fallon. I think, he does that show, one of his late night talk shows, and he said he was reading out from the census, and he said something like that, oh, the white population of the United States has declined in relative and absolute terms. And the audience just ecstatic, they started cheering this on. I think, why are you cheering this on? I mean, this was, after all, these are the people who created America. This is what, what the founding fathers, I mean, everything, the whole American history, which is very successful. Remember, this is, a small country. It was, it was an experiment, but it was pretty small compared to the great powers of Europe. And they powered their way to the greatest economy in the world, powered their way into two victories in two world wars very shrewdly. They did it all extremely shrewdly. They didn't, they got into each war at the right time. They didn't. There was no naivete about getting in too early or anything like that. Very, very shrewd, and they built up this massive industry that was that powered the world economy. This was the Americans. The Americans that were something they were supposed to be ashamed of. The one cheering. Oh, great! They're now in a minority.
And a magnet for people around the world. I mean, to this day, and you and I have discussed this, it's something that the Jimmy Fallon crowd probably just can't comprehend. I mean, if it is so systemically racist and white people are so bad and so and should be so held in contempt, why do so many brown and black people rush our border?
Yes, that's never answered.
Never answered.
It's a very obvious question. I mean, it's never answered.
What I don't like, I don't really, because I am an American and I was brought up there. I mean, I'm of course not, I'm a late boomer, to be honest. But we didn't have types of Americans. And we fought against that in our lifetime,
right.
Desegregation and ending Jim Crow. But it seems to me with this critical race theory is they're reintroducing Jim Crow in a very different, in a very similar form in this really convoluted mumbo jumbo language.
Yeah. And it's very interesting that if you think back to the 1960s, ultimately there was an optimism. I think once you do introduce the Civil Rights Act and everything is there isn't really any fundamental differences. People will start working together happily. I saw the other day an old movie from the 1960s, In the Heat of the Night. I don't know if you remember it, with very good film. But there, it was this Sidney Poitier playing this black policeman from Philadelphia. He arouses a lot of resentment when he's down in the South in Mississippi, but they get over their hatreds quite quickly, and they start working actually quite cooperatively soon enough. And the film ends on this optimistic note that, well, once you get over your initial prejudices, you can work together. No one really believes that anymore. The depths of division, racial divisions, are far more intense than they were in 1967 when this film was made.
But at the same time, Barack Hussein Obama was elected president.
Yeah, exactly.
Please explain. But the country is racist.
That's it. But there's Obama, and all he can talk about. This is a man twice. He was twice elected. All he could talk about is the incorrigible racism of Americans. In other words, instead of saying thank you, you voted for me twice, he just knows what terrible racist people Americans are. That's the Obamas. And so, this is a person who has really done so much harm to race relations in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, and for the former first couple to be living on Martha's Vineyard in a multi-million-dollar mansion to lecture everyone on their values or lack of values. I mean, personally, I don't like Barack Obama. I think he's the first grifter president, and I think he's setting a pattern, okay, for future people. You got elected president twice, so you can sit on the board of Netflix. Wow, that's something to really aspire to, I suppose.
Right. And it's actually quite amusing. I mean, just is that how that whole Martha's Vineyard escapade. He has really revealed him for what he is. I mean, you and I already knew what he was, But now others have suddenly seen, wow, we were really taken in by this guy. I mean, this is someone who really doesn't care about anyone. All the things that he pretended to care about, he's never cared about any of that. Or he wants money and celebrity. That's all.
Yeah, he never was responsible for anything he did as president.
Right.
He never got his hands dirty. Okay, he never had any flesh in the game.
Right.
And elitist, and it was basically his presidency was preparing him for his retirement.
Yeah. A long retirement. He's a young.
Oh, we're gonna hear from this guy for a long time. But you're right. I mean, what could have been, what should have been. I mean, I don't know, George. I mean, I remember. I'm going to really date myself, everybody. But I remember when I saw Roots, the TV series, which was a huge cultural event.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Okay, it was very, very powerful. And I have to admit, and I'm sad to say this, but my parents, particularly my father, was a very racist man. And being my age at the time, my generation being exposed to that, it was very eye-opening, okay? And it was very painful too, because we didn't really know a whole lot about that history. And that was, but that was uplifting. It was uplifting.
Right.
Okay. And then when you get George Floyd, I hate to be wonkish about this, but like the Supreme Court will only take cases that will make good law, a good precedent. And George Floyd is not that.
No,
he wasn't a great guy. No, all right. He had a rap sheet.
He was a violent person. Exactly. That's why it's so disgusting, this whole iconography of George Floyd, making him out to be some sort of a civil rights leader, a leader of his people. He was nothing of the sort. It's like, he was a criminal and a junkie. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous doing this, but it's a politically motivated thing. But why, it's now, if you go to any poll, any polls that they have in the United States, do you think race relations is getting better or worse? Overwhelmingly, people say it's getting worse, and that is a big change from what it was. Say in the 60s, yeah, I mean there was violence in the streets and so on, but there was at least an optimism that things are going to get better. Okay, we're now we've seen white people that say, okay, yeah, we did all these bad things. We had slavery, we had Jim Crow. Okay, let's put a line under it, and now we're going to get on. Well, it's sort of the Lyndon Johnson view. I think people believe that, but no one believes that now.
Yeah, but I mean, it's interesting you say that. When people are asked these questions in the polls, what I think is, I think it's very complicated, and I think it can be contradictory. I think there's the perception that race relations are worse, but I think a lot of people would say, well, that's what I heard on TV. That's what NPR.
I think that's fair.
It's like, I don't have a problem with my neighbor, and we actually talk about this. It's kind of weird, isn't it? We heard that. Did you hear that on NPR? Right. I don't know if we know what the truth is here, and what we really should believe, because if it happens all of the time. If it's white on black crime, it's everywhere. Right. But sometimes it's in the 30, 40, 50 shootings in Chicago and New York. It's almost exclusively black on black, and you never hear about it. I mean, what about those people?
No, well, that's it. I think that's an unfortunate aspect of it all, which is that the media do an absolutely terrible job, which is the most frequent kind of violent crime, black on black crime. Then comes black on white crime, and then becomes white on black crime. It is very rare. Happens, but it's very rare. But if you listen to the media, then wow, this is it's terrible. There's white lynching mobs hanging around on the streets. So that's but that's the media do this, and they've created a complete misperception. I mean, completely have no idea about the true nature of crime in the United States.
And crimes committed against Asians. Okay,
right, exactly.
They don't like to go into the minutia of that. Okay,
right.
I remember the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. I remember how the Koreans came out and they said, "You're not touching my store." Okay.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And but I mean, just going back to what we're talking about, there's a real problem here, which is if you have diversity, you can't really function as a nation. I mean, there is a reason why countries do put borders, and they don't say, well, come on in, the gates open, whoever wants to come in, just come in. People want to maintain their national identity, because otherwise you can't function as a nation. Once you start bringing in, now you got the Hispanic, then you got the Mexican, you got the Puerto Rican, and everyone is basically more interested in their own group than in the nation as a whole. And I think that's really the issue. How do you get people to think of the nation as a whole, not their own little ethnic group?
I mean, let's go back to medieval Europe. Why did they build castle walls, George? Right. Because inside these walls, people are protected. Okay, you're protected here. And that's why we have borders now. Okay, I mean, what I find really disheartening is that nominally speaking, I don't have any problem with diversity at all. I mean, why should I? Okay, but why can't we have unity with diversity? Okay, is that you may have a certain cultural background and maybe preferences, but at the end of the day, you and I have more in common. Right. Though we could have, I mean, you have a Hungarian background, mine's Irish. Okay.
Right. But that's why you have to have the unity, and that's why, I mean, when the Bolsheviks got themselves into trouble, and it was already becoming apparent, even by the 1930s, having fostered Ukrainian nationalism again in order to diminish greater Russian nationalism, greater Russian chauvinism. They fostered Ukrainian nationalism, and suddenly they started getting worried. Hey, got Ukrainian nationalism. This is going to be a problem. They're not thinking about the Soviet people. That is a Ukrainian nationalism, so they have to start cracking down. But they should have thought about it. But instead, they kept fostering this diversity, which in the end destroyed the Soviet Union. So that's what happens. I mean, you foster diversity, within a generation or two, you suddenly created a wholly different peoples.
We have to finish the equation. If you promote diversity at the expense of unity, as you're saying, you're kind of finishing your sentence. And that is very true. I mean, it's very interesting. By the end of the Soviet Union, you could see like the Georgian Republic or the three Baltic republics. They were living so much better than the average Russian in the Russian Soviet Republic. Okay, and it's because of that letting that go. Is that, and then it created obviously tensions, okay? Because a lot of people say, look, why do we have this huge country and I'm not better off, but they have fruits and vegetables, we have no, okay? Yeah. I mean, it was common lore that you could fly from Moscow down to Tbilisi bring two empty suitcases and bring back oranges, and you could sell it on the black market because they had no oranges in Moscow.
No, that's exactly it. It was extraordinary folly on the part of the Bolsheviks. I mean, they did this, and it should have been apparent, very early on, that this was going to end badly. But and that's what happened. So, and this is the example that and Yugoslavia also, it happened kind of there as well. Tito, he also was afraid of Serbian nationalism, because the Serbs were the most populous nation in Yugoslavia. So he started promoting, the Slovenians. He started promoting, the Muslims. Oh, the Muslims are a nation. So they're a nation just like the Serbs, and the Montenegro. That's another nation. I mean, so they think this is very clever. I'm fostering all these different nationalism, and then once that a unifying figure disappears, much like in the Soviet Union, the Communist Party kind of collapses. Boom! They suddenly find, hey, we've got nothing in common with one another.
And that's why I'm glad we bring in the history of the Bolsheviks and the Soviet Union, because the Bolsheviks were ideologically possessed. Yeah. So is the American left. They are ideologically possessed. Yeah. Okay, and what their short-term goal obviously is power. But what they're going to do, they're creating a toxin, a cocktail that they're not going to be able to control. And this is what we're seeing right now. I mean, and to end off here, I mean, look at what they want to do to the military. I mean, why would people want to join the military now? Okay, that's going to be something immediate. That's going to happen pretty soon, because not only are young people obese, they're not particularly well educated. They don't like exercise. I mean, the pool of people to bring into the military. I mean, it's already, the U.S. military is already challenged by that. Okay, and now you have to basically carry around a Mao Red Book. You know.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a very good point. Because in every country, the military is the symbol of unity. I mean, that is, the country, our military, that symbolizes unity. And when you have essentially kind of purges, well, there's no room for Trump supporters in our military, no room for people who have white nationalist or, views or whatever. Well, then people can say, well, this is not our military. It's the military of a thoroughly modern Millie, of the critical race theory. I mean, what's that? How is this military anything to do with the United States, as I understand it? So, yeah, that's a really serious blow. Once you start attacking the military, you're really getting to undermining the very roots of your country.
Particularly since the end of the Second World War, before, but particularly since the Second World War, the most important, next to university, most important institution for upward mobility for all classes and all groups, all ethnic groups.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, all. No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I've always, that's where you get social mobility, because boom, you come in, you get a pretty decent income, then you get a nice free education. They send you up, you get all paid for, your masters all paid for. So, and you're also going to get good jobs, because once you're a veteran, lots and lots of jobs are open to you that are not open to non-veterans.
And when you're in a firefight, I don't think you care if it's Gonzalez or whatever his name is.
Right.
Does he have your back?
Yeah.
That's what only matters.
Yeah.
Have the other guy's back, okay? Yes. And when you want to bring in this other BS, okay, people will die. People will die, okay? It's ridiculous. All right, everybody. Read Pat. You can put in the
Buchanan.
Pat Buchanan is one of our favorites. Okay, he's very provocative. He's an excellent writer, and you instantly agree or disagree with him, and that's a good thing. Okay, you know where he's coming from. Right. All right, everybody. We're on local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. George and I are doing Zoom interviews with gagglers. We got the store up, nice goodies there. We've done some Q&As. I think maybe in a day or so we'll do another Q&A, because the questions are accumulating. George has already done a live stream, and we're going to do a super chat on YouTube. Let us back on.
That's right, exactly. A super chat, which will be a lot of fun. We'll let you know the exact time and place. And we have the tip jar, which Buddy is, you can see, he's getting very, very depressed about its empty condition. But in all seriousness, anything you can contribute would be most appreciated. I mean, we're very grateful for all of your help. The more you can help us, the better our product, and you'll get that much more enjoyment out of it, as will we.
And we do this almost every single day.
Every single day, yeah. Remember, if you like The Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.